So we have like it's an ask us anything kind of session. If you have any generic questions or specific things you want to learn more about, we also have Neil. Where's Neil? We lost Neil. We lost Neil, but we'll try to answer the questions that are for him if we know the answers. And so yeah, just to remind you, we have Kelsey, who's our PR director, who helps our portfolio companies as well as 500 startups get as much media coverage as possible. We have Ed, who is an entrepreneur in residence in our San Francisco accelerator. He actively mentors companies in the 500 startups portfolio, and he has a sort of long years of experience in the VC industry. Andrea, one of the best pitch coaches and storytelling coaches in Silicon Valley, venture partner at 500 startups. She trains around 300, 400, 200 companies for the accelerator every year. So if you have any questions about how to tell your story, terms with VCs, how to get PR, please, now's the time. If you don't have any questions, I'm happy to talk more.
Who here nervous rambles? If I'm not prepared, I nervous ramble. Who here nervous rambles? Great question. The key is you have to know beforehand how to tell your story. And it's not a points. It's really boring. You can't say problem, solution, market, team, done every single time. So loop it all together in a story and tell it in a very similar way every time you do it. You prepare it and then you do it. You don't wing it every time because you'll nervous ramble. Neil, get up here. Guys, we got our legal expert in the house. Woo! All right, thanks for your question.
Neil, where were you, man?
I didn't know I was okay. Sorry. I was answering questions outside.
Sorry, in relation to the Middle East, and what is the question exactly? How to So what stage are you, would that be in? You have a product or you launched this week? And you're a media platform? So the usual questions that an investor would ask at an early stage. First of all, the team is really important. You guys have the experience to do it because there's not much data to dig into right now. Maybe the VC would try the product and see if it works. If you have any early sort of testimonials, that would also help. Andrea?
Why are you pitching now? Another reason. So Zafer, if you really need the money, if you're going to die if you don't raise money and you have to go out and pitch, then you have to pitch wherever stage you are. But if I were you and you've pitched, you've only launched in a week, just don't go out pitching investors yet. Wait until you have the right progress, because it's often that, it makes sense, right, why investors wouldn't want to invest in this stage. So many people have visions. So if you don't have a really, like those things that I put up here, if you don't have one of those things, it's just going to be really, really, really difficult to raise money anywhere, even in the Silicon Valley. You're always raising for leads, but you're only really seriously fundraising, like I said, in a couple short weeks, right? I don't know, you can talk about fundraising more.
Yeah, I kind of agree. I think you should build some traction because otherwise, especially if you just launched, even waiting a month or 6 weeks, you could just talk about the last 6 weeks because that's ultimately going to be their question, and they're probably not going to, they want to see some sort of reaction to the product.
Andrea said something earlier today. She was giving the advice that you should actually do mentorship sessions. So if I was meeting an investor at your stage, I would position it as a mentorship session, and try to so you are asking the questions instead of them asking the questions. And I remember a mentor once told me, ask an investor for advice and you will get their money. Ask them for money and you'll get advice. So it's very useful.
What's up? Oh, interesting. Didn't think I'd get that question over here. No, it's a good question, actually. Okay. 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 So the first question, that's actually a really good question because not a lot of people realize this. A lot of people don't know that Delaware is actually the preferred state of incorporation for like a very strong majority of U.S. companies. And it's not like they have to have an office there. It's just to be incorporated there. So Facebook's incorporated in Delaware, but Facebook is physically based in Mountain View, Menlo Park. And it's actually really funny because a lot of times if you're trying to find out whether a merger has happened or a new company is up and running or something, you can actually search in Delaware for the company's name and try to get hints that way. So a lot of reporters do that, Kelsey. But then, and to fight that back, they create code names and all this cool stuff to hide stuff that's happening, in Delaware. But Delaware is really cool because the regime is very favorable to companies. It's very favorable to CEOs against shareholders, for board members against shareholders, and it's very hard to sue companies in Delaware because the law is so company protective. And so to fight that, Nevada has revamped their legal regime to sort of match that because now in the U.S., Delaware is famous for two things. I think no state income tax and good Delaware law. Otherwise, nobody cares about Delaware. Like, have you been to Delaware before? No. Have you been to Delaware? No. So who here's been to Delaware? Wow. I was not expecting that. Just one person. Okay, I've never been to Delaware. Okay. You traveled to Delaware, but not through Delaware. Because I traveled through Delaware, but I had to stop for gas, but I've never. It is cheap. I maybe stopped for a Roy Rogers, but that's it. Oh, depressing. Anyways, so Nevada created their own Nevada legal regime. Frankly, I don't really care for it. I think Delaware is if you're going to be in the U.S. and incorporated in the U.S., let's do Delaware. There's no reason to do Nevada. Some people like some peculiarities about it. I don't know what they are because I don't care about Nevada. But so I think doing Delaware is fine. And Delaware will be cheaper, will be just as cheap, if not cheaper than Nevada to incorporate. Keep in mind that Delaware will have taxes, but they're capped at $250. It's just based on how many shareholders you have. That's called franchise taxes. Now, the second question, how does citizenship work for Delaware companies? I don't think you have to be a citizen to form a Delaware company. Oh, okay. To work with the banking industry. What do you mean by working with the banking industry? Like, process payments? Okay. Well, so typically, like a bank like SVB will, they'll take you're going to be opening a bank account in your company's name. If you're doing PayPal or Braintree or Stripe, which by the way has a Stripe Atlas, which is really useful, like you're not going to do business with, what's your name? You're not going to do business with Ahmed. They're going to do business with your company. And so they're going to look for your company's incorporation documents. When you cash checks or process payments, it'll be to your company. They do? I didn't know that. EIN. Yeah, it's like a tax ID number. Yeah. And they require you to be citizens if you're a director or officer? Oh, I don't think. Maybe ask your banker and be like, "Hey, I'm not a citizen, but I'm a director of the company," which is perfect. Oh, you have to do it in person. know that.
I used to do accounting. My first company was an accounting company. It's difficult. There's a lot of documentation on the internet, and international founders have made it work. The hardest thing is when it's time to pay yourself, actually. And again, there's lots of things out there. So, yeah, that's really the hardest thing too. Eventually, but
I think a lot of what banks require is just a question of like risk mitigation. They don't want like the Nigerian prince who wants to give $1 million but really take it kind of situation. And so you said you solved it when you were there in person, right? Right. I would try to pull a connection then. I'm sorry. Like I wish there was like I wish they were better suited for this, but like I would try to like talk to someone and be like, "Hey, what the hell is going on here?" Because you need to do your business. You shouldn't have to be a citizen to do it of the US. Who wants to be a citizen of the US? There's no sort of viewpoint your investors will take about that. Like if my portfolio company comes to me and says, "Hey, I'm reincorporating in Delaware, and I want U.S. investor money. What do you guys think?" They're not going to be like, "Oh, I think your company's doing poorly," or "I don't like you." Um, they're probably going to ask, "Well, I invested in the company. Where are your assets going to sit?" Because they want the assets to sit in the entity that they invest in. And the same thing with the Delaware investors. So if your Delaware investors are going to invest in the Delaware company, you're going to have to transfer your assets to the Delaware company, and your investors will therefore ask to go of the assets and sort of move the money up the chain. That's the only consequence. You want to do that now because that stuff takes a lot of time. You don't want to sign a term sheet and then tell an investor, "Oh, by the way, I'm doing this complex restructuring. It'll take you 4 months to finish the restructuring, so wire the money then." In Silicon Valley, a Series A can take 2 weeks. And if you don't close a Series A in 2 weeks, then the exclusivity runs out in 30 days. And then you're free in the open. They don't have to invest anymore. And so I think one of Dave's big sort of 500 startups, one of their biggest pieces of advice is that time and money kill deals. And so you want to be able to close your money as soon as possible. Just keep that momentum going. If you have a term sheet signed, you should be close. That means telling your lawyers to stop sitting on their asses and actually get the job done. Telling the other side to get the job done. Don't rest until that money's in your bank account.
Just a note, it's very tough to raise money in the US, specifically for an international startup. I meet a lot of founders in the Middle East and like from all over the world that are very hopeful that when they get to the valley, it's going to be like much easier, and the investors there are like so advanced, and they're going to realize how genius my idea is, and they're going to invest with me. But that's not usually the case. Like 500 is one of the very few investors in Silicon Valley that invests in companies outside of Silicon Valley. Most investors would only invest if the founders are in the valley or in the US at least, or if the market or the users are in the US. It has to be something they really understand. Otherwise, they wouldn't get near it. And a lot of the international founders that we get, we set their expectations from day one when they join the program. We tell them it's going to be very difficult for you to raise US money if your team is not in the US, or if your customers are not in the US. And this is one of the reasons why, for 500 to be able to invest in startups internationally, we're setting up funds all over the world, like the 500 Falcons, which Hassan is going to tell you a bit more about. But 500 is not the norm. The norm is they usually
reluctance. And you know what? It's even funnier because when you're talking to a U.S. investor, and I'm sure you all can fundraising, you all can attest to this. No one's going to respond to you. Email Mark at a16z.com. You think he's going to respond to you? He's not going to respond to you. You see him at a party. If you see him at a party and you shake his hand and you tell him about your company, he'll probably tell you to get away from him because he didn't come to the party to get pitched. But hey, you happen to know someone who knows him, and that person writes a glowing introduction about you and sets you up that way. Or you do a demo day at 500 startups where we invite investors, and they come specifically because they want to invest. That's a different scenario. So like already, if you don't have the network that that you need to sort of have to meet these guys in Silicon Valley, you're not going to get anything. And so my biggest piece of advice, this is, I don't even have a company, but I know this, like, because I would never email someone out of the blue if they didn't know me or have a connection to me that someone could vouch for me for. Never.
So I would say before just consider why do you want to set up in the US? If it's for payment processing, that's a good reason. If it's for investments, I would maybe advise like just test the waters first before you spend all that money and see if there's appetite to invest in your startup, and then take that step.
Yeah, build out your network. That's probably a better use of your time.
Can I rephrase that? When should a founder consider spending money on incorporating a company? At what milestone?
So here's why incorporating a company is important. It might seem like some bullshit thing that costs you money and that someone created just to like make money off of you. But like incorporation is important because every action you take on your personal capacity makes you personally liable. So if you have a company that's up and running that does deliveries and you've hired someone to do the deliveries and that person shows up to a customer's doorstep and kills them, then that person's family can sue you personally for money. And you can go to jail. That's not a good thing. Suppose instead that you have a company and that your employee is employed by the company and that employee is the one who that employee does the same thing, kills the customer, and you get sued. It's not you who's getting sued, it's your company that's getting sued, and that protects you. You establish a company to protect yourself. And I would say you should establish a company the moment you start doing actions for your company. And establishing a company should not be expensive. Maybe it is in the UAE, but if you're incorporating in the BVI or Cayman or Delaware, if you have a good lawyer, probably $2,000. I know that might seem like a lot of money to some. I view that as a very small cost. A Series A costs about $60,000. So it's a drop in the bucket.
Just to back that up, when I started my company, I didn't actually put anything live on the web until I was incorporated. Even just a simple incorporation, LLC or something, just to protect yourself, because you don't know what's going to happen. So I agree. Like when you're going live with interactions, you want to be covered, and that's the point, I think, whenever you start interacting with anyone.
I don't know if you remember like the Occupy Wall Street. It was this really, I'm going to call it silly and be a little charged here politically, but whatever. The idea was like Goldman Sachs is we should treat them as a person and like go after Lloyd Blankfein and throw him in jail. But that's the purpose of the business form. You sue the businesses and you get your money from the business. You can't, unless the person actually did something egregiously wrong, which is arguable. But you can't usually put a CEO in jail, and so the corporate form protects you.
I want to say one more thing because you mentioned co-founder. This is also protecting you against each other. If you have a good startup lawyer, you will all be on vesting. So you said co-founders. So if you have 3 co-founders, you have to work out like obviously the splits, but even more important than the equity splits, in my opinion, is vesting for each of the founders. Vesting means that you own parts of your company only as time goes by, right? And these are those cliffs, meaning like, okay, 1-year cliff, 4-year vest, and these things help protect you against each other. So founders need to be investing for companies, and that you should also put in place.
And then a corollary to that is that your lawyers don't represent you, they represent your company. So if you're ever fired from your company or you decide to leave your company, you can't turn to your lawyer and be like, yo, dude, help me out. The lawyer is going to say, I don't care about you. My client is the company. So that's also a pretty important distinction.
I think also it sends the wrong message to investors when you haven't committed like the $2,000 or $5,000 to register the company yourself because you're waiting for some proof of concept, but still you're going out and expecting people to give you money, or
They're not going to give you money to your personal name. I hope not. Yeah, so that's why I recommend not incorporating. And I mean, registering in Dubai is one thing, right? Like if a company is incorporated in Delaware but operating in New York, I tell them to register in New York as a business entity. So the difference between Delaware and BVI is just like who are you raising money from? If you're raising money from a U.S. investor, you'll have a lot of ability to get. We have a lot easier time as a Delaware company. If you're raising internationally from like a Temasek, they have a lot of experience investing in Delaware companies, but BVI also works for them.
probably like two more questions and
Well, so his question about the Panama Papers and how it affects, you know, incorporation. I think other opinions and other people on the panel might have different opinions. The Panama Papers was meant to target people who are hiding money in like other jurisdictions as a form of tax haven. You are doing none of that. I hope not. So it doesn't matter. Like, as long as I'm not doing anything illegal, who cares? It might make it less tax efficient, but it wouldn't affect your ability to
Startups
incorporate.
don't make money, so we're not the problem. They're not going after us. We're all running at a negative. Those
They're
are the people who
after-
are storing their profits.
They're after James Cameron and his like dad's wealth in Panama, not like Joe's startup.
Okay, sure. So I think if you have something interesting to say around the economy here or the industry that your startup is in, or your startup is provocative and interesting, U.S. reporters will absolutely pay attention. If you're not doing something as interesting, it's going to be harder. But just because you're here, I mean, there are reporters who cover the various regions. So I would just research at TechCrunch who has been covering this region. And then also it helps to start getting local coverage and then build up to U.S. coverage.
Okay, I'm going to say something controversial. No, I think ecosystem building is very hard to do. I think there are three big components. There's talent, and therefore companies. There's money to invest, and then people to acquire. And so I think talent and the companies are here. I think the money is getting there. But then the third big component is acquisitions, like exits, right? Like when I go to Silicon Valley, I can name 20, but I'll name 5 right now. Airbnb, Uber, Dropbox, Facebook, Google, and more, Amazon, Facebook, Microsoft. Like these are all companies that acquire companies and provide liquidity and this constant cycle. You challenged all of us to name a Dubai company that we're particularly fond of. I'll give you a challenge. Name 5 serial acquirers in the region.
I can name two.
Two.
I can name three actually, but you know the thing is like few years back, I could only name one. So Aramex did a lot of acquisitions. Yahoo Maktub Maktub before they exited to Yahoo, they did like around 50, 60 acquisitions, but that was like literally the only one. I know Souq is actively صح Hassan. Souq are out in the market. Sorry.
Well, see, Rocket Internet is
Yeah.
different though because they're a cloning company. How big was it? And that's the other thing. Those transactions. So I've done. I used to do Silicon Valley M&A. Those transactions happen every week in Silicon Valley. Like they happen nonstop.
It's true. It's true. Like they happen probably like a couple of times a year here, but the difference that you see, and I'm sure Hassan agrees here as well, is that we're seeing much more of these happening. Like if you asked us like a couple of years ago on whether we'll ever have a unicorn in the Middle East, we would have never had like a name on our minds. But here is Souq.com, and it's actually happening. So there's always a first time for something to happen, and I think there is an opportunity here is that we're actually the generation that's witnessing this sort of like first time that's happening. I like what Dave always says. Dave says it's easier to raise money. Dave is our founder, the founder of 500 Startups, Dave McClure, and he was telling me the other day, he goes like, I really believe it's easier to raise money anywhere in the world today than it was to raise money in 1980 in Silicon Valley.
And it's way cheaper to start a company today than it was 10 years ago.
And it's true. I think one major disadvantage that we have here in the Middle East is that we don't have enough VCs. And the reason why this is a problem is that just think of the telecom industry, for example. When you have one telecom company in the country, what usually happens? The prices are high, the service is really bad. When you get two companies to compete, prices go down, service gets better. Four, prices go down, service gets better. And this is what happens in the VC industry as well. So the customer is the entrepreneur. The VC is the provider of the money. The more VCs you have in a market, the more competition, the better terms, and the faster they will act. So why would like an Arab VC reply to an email within a week or two if he has the option of waiting for 3 months because he knows nothing is going to happen? Who are you going to go to? There are only like 6 or 7 or 8 active ones in the region, so there's no fear of missing out. I feel the more as the more funds are created and the more VCs are in the game, you're going to see this region shaping up pretty quickly. And this is something that Dave is very strong, opinionated about. Is that he always tells the team at 500, and I'm sure Hassan agrees here, is that whatever region we act in, we act by the Silicon Valley standards. We don't act by that region's standards, because what we want to do is we want to actually raise the bar, and we want to give the entrepreneurs better terms. We want to get the ecosystem to that sort of point. And this is like really, really important for us. This is why we do these sessions here. This is why we do VC education with Stanford University. We teach like people how to be good VCs. It's really like a core side of our mission at 500s. How can we get more VCs to get engaged in ecosystems? Because we understand as soon as you get more VCs, the entrepreneurs will be better off. So this is where I feel like most work needs to be done. On the entrepreneurs end, I think the entrepreneurs here are fine. Like they can go to the net and check anything they need. Like look at the questions we've received here today. They're better. Like some of them are like more sophisticated than questions that we get in the valley. So I feel the talent is there. Probably it's just like a matter of time, probably till like things really start to fruit.
Really quickly, two companies. One, Aptudo, came out of Dubai and was in our accelerator recently. They're doing really well. Nicholas was here working for several years and actually got his first capital here, I believe. The other one, Karim, seems like a very promising business. I think it's two McKinsey people from Dubai who started that. And, they picked us up at the airport, and that one seems off to the races.
I just want to go quickly onto Zafer's point, because I work with a lot of emerging markets. I was in West Africa recently, and the real reality is that it's really difficult around the world, not because entrepreneurs aren't amazing. Actually, I believe that entrepreneurship is strong every place I've ever gone to work with companies, it's really the other things Neil was talking about. The investors are so not risk averse to the point that VCs are one problem, but even just people to fund the angel side of the business, it's very difficult to bridge from idea to some traction. So, and then the third thing that hasn't been mentioned is I think mentorship is really lacking, right? So there's actually quite a lot of capital in regions that are nascent, that are up and coming, but there's really little mentorship from people who have really built big companies. So one thing I think is important is community building, helping each other, and really, this is the thing about Silicon Valley that's very unique. Founders give other founders favors all the time without asking anything in return. So if I know Ed and Ed's trying to do something and I'm doing something, even though, we are doing our own startups and we're both fundraising, we will help each other constantly. And I think it's very, very important that you build that culture in early nascent markets.
I think we're getting I think we're getting there. Like in the past year and a half, I left Dubai a year and a half ago. I'm just amazed by the number of deals we're seeing in the region, the number of VCs. Lebanon alone produced probably 20 or 30 active VC funds in the last 18 months. Jordan is maybe Jordan has plateaued, I feel, but Dubai is going really fast as well. I definitely because I go out and come back to the region, I'm definitely seeing a lot of progress. On to Andrea's point, I think another difference between the VCs here and in the Valley are that most VCs in Silicon Valley are entrepreneurs by nature, and they started companies and they had exits and they know exactly what a tech entrepreneur is going through. They know exactly what advice to give. They have that operational experience, which unfortunately in the region here, most of the VC fund managers don't usually have. They're usually from either finance backgrounds or legal backgrounds. And this is one of the reasons why Dave was very keen on recruiting ex-entrepreneurs to head our funds in the different regions we operate in. And this is my introduction to my colleague Hassan here, who is leading the 500 Falcons Fund for the Middle East. He's an ex-entrepreneur himself and an ex-banker, so he fulfills both criterias. And he's just launching his fund here, and he's here to tell us more about it. I want to thank my colleagues Neil, Kelsey, Ed, and Andrea, and I hope you guys found our sessions useful today. Please feel free to email any of us. It's very easy to hack our email addresses. It's just the first name at 500.co. So all you need to do is look at the program today and just send us any questions you have, and or find us for the next hour, and we'll be more than happy to help out. Thank you all so much, and I'll leave you with Hassan.
Thanks, Zafer. So hi everyone. So like Zafer said, I head up the Middle East and North Africa for 500 startups. We're in the process of raising a fund that's going to be focused entirely on this region. So I'm here just to tell you a bit more about what we're looking for and what we're going to be doing here over the next few years, and how we really believe in this market, regardless of what other people say. And we're going to be very active in building out the ecosystem around us. So just a sort of a bird's eye view of what we're looking for. So as 500 startups, we typically like to invest in startups that have some sort of traction. So if you've got an idea, or it's something that you haven't really launched yet, if it's a product that hasn't been launched, if it's alpha or anything like that, it's not something we're going to be looking at actively. We typically will invest once there is some users, some customers, some revenues. And that's sort of the level that we would be looking at. We don't invest huge amounts of money. We are looking to invest between $50,000 to $100,000 across the broad portfolio of companies in the region. And if you guys are some of the top 20% of the companies, as we see things are succeeding, we'll double down and maybe invest up to $500,000 at the next checks. In terms of what we've already been doing, we've already invested in about more than 30 startups in the region across 9 markets. So we have already been active. Those have come out of our global funds, or they've gone to the Accelerator program in Silicon Valley. And we are looking to do maybe 30 to 60 investments per year. So we'll be quite active in investing and deploying money in this region. I'm originally from Bahrain. I'm I actually believe in this region quite heavily. I haven't moved to Silicon Valley like some of the other guys that sort of gave up here, and I really believe that this market is probably the next biggest market and emerging market in the world. I think where we are, the questions about the sort of the stage of the market, we're probably where India and Southeast Asia were maybe 3 years ago or so. We're seeing the same sort of inflection points that we saw in those markets. More VC funds, more acquisitions happening, later stage funds and later stage acquirers coming into the market and looking actively into that market, and more capital availability even at the angel stage in markets such as Saudi, in Egypt, and other markets like that. So I think this is the right time to be investing in this market, and this is the right time to be building a startup. I remember I set up one of the first angel investment networks in the region in 2010. When we launched, there was very little deal flow, and none of it really was very good. So now in the short span of about 6 years, we are seeing some phenomenal investments here, and I think we're going to have no problem in making those investments. So yeah, that's about us. The fund's going to be probably about $30 million in size. We're going to start actively investing sometime this year out of that fund. Yeah, so if you guys are looking for funding, we're going to be active and we're going to be doing stuff like that. So yeah, I thought I'd just give that introduction and then open it up to questions more specifically about the region and what we're doing here. So if anyone has any questions about the region, about our opinions and what we're going to do, so I can answer those more specifically. So for us, like I said, we're not going to invest unless there's a product with some users. Typically, we're also looking at revenues in the region, so you might be generating maybe $2,000 to $5,000 in revenues. We know that this region, that follow-on capital might be difficult to come by, so we want to see that things are maybe slightly more self-sustaining than they are in Silicon Valley. And so that's really the stage that would make sense for you to come and talk to us at that stage. And how to approach us, like everyone said, it's our email address, although it gets flooded from time to time, and it's probably better to get a referral from someone else into us, and that's probably a better approach to it. So someone that knows us to make a referral, and that works a bit better. Yeah. No, there's others. Like we're not going to invest in everything. So we look at traction. That's probably the main qualifier. Have you got users? Have you got customers? Have you got a product that's active? Then after that, we'll look at the team, we'll look at the market, we'll look at the market size, and then we'll look at valuation and all that sort of stuff. So there's, do you know how to have you got your shit together for marketing and customer acquisition as well? So there's a bunch of things that we look at after that. If you're building a startup just to get investment, I don't think you're doing the right thing. So if you're building a startup to go by template to figure out how you're going to get an investor, that's probably not the right idea to do it. So really, if you've got, so we're investing actively in the region in BVI structures, Cayman, and Delaware structures. So if you can pre-register and get that sort of organization done, it'll speed up the process. But it's not a prerequisite to start talking to us in terms of the structures and stuff. No, I'm based on an airplane, so yeah. We'll have people on the ground in a bunch of different countries, so we won't just be based in one place. And we haven't officially got headquarters yet in the region. I'm Bahraini, so I'm living at home right now, but you don't have to come there. Yeah. As 500, we don't like gaming because it's a very hit and miss business. We like things around gaming, so maybe publishers and things like that. But if you're just gonna say, I'm gonna make this amazing game and then it's gonna be great, and yeah, we probably won't make that investment. It's not sustainable. It's not repeatable. It's a one-off sort of business. But we've invested in companies like Tamatam Games, which is a games publisher. So they figured out how to get other people's games and publish them successfully. And so that's more of a repeatable model, and there's revenues that can come out of that. Yeah. So we're looking at revenues maybe between $2,000 to $5,000. There's no hard and fast rule. We might ask for more. We might be okay with less. And sorry, what was the second thing? Yeah. Yes. Dollars, US. Yeah. So we have invested in Tamatam Games. We've invested in Jamalon. We've invested in Shopgo. Shopgo.me is like Shopify for the Middle East. And then we've invested in, sorry, there's 30 of them. So they're all quite, like, these have all raised Series A rounds, and they're going on to raise Series Bs. We've also invested in Fetcher and a few others here in the UAE. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't start my list with the ones that are failing. Yeah. So, yeah, we've got about 30 that we've invested in across the region. Wazaf in Egypt, Adfa'li in Egypt. Yeah, there's a bunch of others. Yeah, Silk Road Images. Thank you for that. That's been doing. Fisha. Okay, I can go through the whole list if you really wanted to. But we've invested in a lot of companies. Yeah. Yeah. So it depends on the valuations. We're seeing valuations in the region for companies that have some traction at between $1 to $3 million pre. We'll typically be investing in convertible notes at that stage, not really in terms of equity. It's just cheaper for us to do it through convertible notes and faster. So, a company that has some traction, some revenue, some users, probably it's between $1 to $2 million, maybe up to $3 million. Because what you need to look at is you don't want to screw your early investors, and most of the Series A deals in the region are happening between $5 to $7 million in valuation. So if you set your seed close to that, you're kind of are screwing your earlier investors, and you don't want that to happen. That's sort of how you would look at it. It's benchmarking across the region. So Egyptian deals are cheaper. Here in the UAE, they're being driven up by a lot of angel investors that aren't so aware of valuations. Yeah. So we're working on a couple of projects related to ecosystem building across different markets. Wherever we go, we really are trying to build ecosystems in those markets. So we're not just there as financial investors. We're there to try and help build out ecosystems around us. And we're active. We come to different things. We do whatever help we need to help out in the ecosystem. But one of the areas I've been focusing on is on the investor side of the equation. Because on the entrepreneur side of the equation, there's a lot of programs that can teach you how to be a better entrepreneur, give you the skills and talents that you might need for customer acquisition. But the weakness we have in the region really is on the investor side. And so we're trying to send a bunch of people from the region to our Stanford sort of training courses on how to invest as a VC. We're probably going to do programs on the ground in the region related to investor education as well. And anyone who invests with us in our fund, we're going to keep telling them, what we're doing, what we're investing in, and inviting them to co-invest with us quite actively. So even that is how we're trying to build that part of the ecosystem. For entrepreneurs, we're probably going to start doing some programs on the ground this year. Probably a couple of events and maybe one program, a post-seed sort of program, which is focused on customer acquisition and distribution, because I think that's a weakness that we have here in the region across startups. Yeah, that's pretty much, we like to build ecosystems. We're not just financial investors. No, we've had a lot of failures. And so we're not scared of failure. We know that 80% of our investments are not going to make us any money. That's sort of the numbers that you look at in VC. But the top 20% will really generate, and maybe the top 1 or 2% will generate 50%, 50 times returns or more. And overall, the model will work. So we're not worried about failure, which is unique for this region. Yeah. Any other questions? Yeah. Industries. So I like stuff that makes money. So if you've got, so the things that we're investing in quite actively are e-commerce and e-commerce related stuff. So payments, logistics, marketplaces, and e-commerce. We like that stuff because that makes money. Then we like media, content, education, mostly in Arabic language because there's a massive gap for that. So we've invested in a couple of video and entertainment startups as well. And something that we're not going to do too many investments in, but I find fun, is investing in some hardware companies. That's not really our strength at 500, but it's fun to talk about. So we've done one, and we're going to do a few others, but not a huge amount. So the focus really is going to be on e-commerce, marketplaces, payments, fintech. I don't know, fintech, whenever regulation sort of catches up to it, then we'll start actively investing. And yeah, media, content, education, stuff that makes money. VR, if you can, yeah. So, any last questions? Yeah. Yeah. Souk.com? Oh, we're not in Souk. Yeah. We're in Fetcher, we're in Edfatly, we're in a bunch of other things, but we're not in Souk.com. Yeah. All right. Great. If anyone has any questions about what we're doing in the region, then just come and catch me. I think we're done. Thank you for coming.